Channel 4 has recently teamed up with Bonnie Blue to create the 1000 Men and Me, the Bonnie Blue story. And we're gonna give it a watch. I know, I've sold out to reactionary commentary. Now, going into this documentary, I was expecting to be shocked, but in reality, I'm really not. Maybe I'm just numb to, the overt sexualization of young women, considering I grew up with people like Belle Delphine and Astrid Wet being sensationalized all over social media. But one thing kept coming through: Bonnie's lack of responsibility for the impact that her content may have, whether she intends that or not. This video is going to be a bit more off script to my usual ones, but if you do enjoy it and you like this kind of content, give me a like and subscribe so that I know whether or not I should be making more reactionary content like this or sticking to my neat little scripted essays. Something I see a lot when talking about Bonnie Blue or any kind of sex work is the idea that women have fought for this for centuries and now we're criticizing a woman that's literally doing the definition of my body, my choice. We're going to go into why that's not necessarily the argument that's being made. I feel like reducing every choice that a woman makes to feminism completely undermines what feminism is all about. So before even getting into the ethics of parasocial sex work, here's how easy it was to watch this documentary. I had to make an account, which I already had, but then it asks me if I was over 18. All I had to do was tick yes. That's it. It literally says that by clicking play, you confirm that you are over 18 years old and that you accept our terms and conditions. Like that's how easy it is for me to watch this. There's no age verification, nothing. No ID check, no login, no verify your account. So in theory, that means my 14-year-old cousin could watch full frontal nudity in between Fortnite rounds. Now, I'm no fan of the Online Safety Act. I don't trust the government to decide what we're allowed to see, especially when they treat queer content like it's the same thing as porn. But there's a difference between opposing state censorship and letting porn level content sit on the same security level as, a BuzzFeed quiz. This isn't a harmless gap in the security market. The earlier people are exposed to commodified sex, especially when it's neatly packaged, male gaze ready, the more it hardwires this idea that women's bodies are just part of that scenery. And something that we'll find in this documentary is that Bonnie does talk about her working conditions, but it seems to be relentlessly positive. Long hours seem to become dedication and intense competition becomes motivation. And every possible downside is spun like a LinkedIn ad for a horny internet site, which does make sense. In the OnlyFans economy, you're not just selling the fantasy of your body, you're selling the fantasy of your job. Because I guess if the audiences ever saw it as exploitive, the fantasy collapses. Though I'm not sure how many people that use would really care about that exploitation, but that's just my own personal views coming into the mix. And that's a problem, not because Bonnie's lying, but because the economic structure rewards performers for filtering out any hint of burnout, coercion, or risk. We saw this with Lily Phillips and how she broke down in her documentary. Without age verification, young viewers aren't just seeing commodified sex, they're seeing commodified enthusiasm for commodified sex. Without age limits, that gets absorbed into the sexual scripts of young viewers before they've even had the chance to think critically about what they're watching. So yeah, I'm saying it, we can protect minors from porn without giving Ofcom a morality wand, but right now, Channel 4 isn't doing neither.
Whether you're barely legal or barely breathing, I want to play.
Whether you're barely legal or barely breathing. No, yeah, she's obviously going for shock value. It's part of her brand. Push boundaries, be outrageous, make the line between sincerity and performance blurry enough that people share the clip and then argue about it online. And this is the issue with Bonnie Blue's marketing, which we're going to go into a lot during this video. When you joke about barely legal, you're not just making a cheeky age gap comment. You're tapping into one of the porn industry's most profitable categories, one that's been mainstream since at least the 1970s. And that category doesn't exist to celebrate newfound adulthood. It exists to make youth, inexperience, and power imbalance erotic. The whole barely part is the selling point because it implies that you have got access to something that you're not quite supposed to. And when you add barely breathing into the mix, We've obviously left edgy humour and wandered into sexualising the absence of agency, which, fun fact, is the opposite of what bodily autonomy means. In sex work, there's always this question of performance versus reality. Like, is she saying it because she means it or because it sells? But in the male gaze economy, those lines are blurred on purpose. Shock statements like this aren't just self-expression, they're marketing. And marketing that treats the lack of consent as a punchline might make the algorithm happy, but it doesn't challenge the power structures that keep sex work so precarious in the first place.
So I'm like, no, I feel sorry for you. The ones that are sat there giving me hate, I'm like, I'm sorry, you're so basic. Basic because you don't think that sex work is, something that women should aspire to. Now, Bonnie talks about filming sex, including bangs, as one of her kinks, something that she enjoys. And look, there's nothing wrong with people having kinks. There's nothing wrong with liking filming yourself having sex. But when every turn on that you mention just happens to be high demand content, we're not just talking about private desire, we're talking about market positioning. She literally says she needed to be different to get somewhere in I definitely knew I needed to be different on OnlyFans because there is 2 million creators on OnlyFans.
And that woman who criticised her for doing it are basic. Which is fascinating because in Bourdieus terms, that's pure distinction. Defining yourself as sophisticated, liberated, or above the mainstream by positioning your critics as boring, unsophisticated, stuck in old norms, or, as she puts it, basic. The problem is, in her framing, all critique gets lumped into the same box. Conservative puritanism, slut-shaming, or moral panic. And that's just, convenient. How many times can I say, in one video? Let's start a counter. This just means that she never has to distinguish between feminists asking structural questions about the industry, which A, she probably doesn't want to answer, and B, she probably doesn't even know how to answer, and the pearl-clutching MPs that are insisting that women's shoulders should be covered at all times. It's a rhetorical shortcut that lets you brush off any challenge without engaging in it.
I'm outside Nottingham University to pleasure as many uni students in 2 weeks.
Deliberately targeting 18-year-olds and virgins at Nottingham Trent University isn't just quirky marketing, it's tapping into that same barely legal trope we've talked about, eroticizing inexperience, folding it into a commercial product and selling the idea that your first time should be with someone who's gonna film it. And this is where agency and structure starts to blur. Bonnie gets to frame her work as adventurous and non-conformist, but the specific differences she's chosen, youth, inexperience, sexual spectacle, all line up perfectly with what sells in the male gaze economy. Which means that even when she's rebelling against her female critics, she's still playing by the industry's rules. Maybe she's not as different as she claims to be.
I guess groundbreaking because it's realistic, it's relatable.
Saying that she's making realistic and relatable by filming with real random men, not trained male porn stars, but everyday guys, bodies that look like yours, lads, if any lads are watching. And on the surface, that is kind of positive. I guess it's nice that she's trying to get rid of men's insecurities. She's trying to move away from that hyper muscular star stereotype that can leave some men feeling insecure. Isn't there a catch? Whose insecurities are we addressing here? Men's. Who is for men? It's always been for men. This isn't about making porn more comfortable for women. It's about making men feel more comfortable consuming porn that they're already consuming. You have to be comfortable consuming porn if you're gonna watch it in the first place. Already caters to men. The whole industry is built on men. And okay, sure, if it's making more men feel comfortable watching porn, are you then not making more men watch porn than already are? Is that supposed to be a good thing? Even within her individual work, it's still dominated by men. The videographer is a man, her stylist is a man, and the final product is aimed squarely at the male gaze. When Bonnie frames this as something honourable, she's positioning male comfort as a public service. It's telling men that there are women out there that they're entitled to, such as Bonnie Blue, and I don't know if that is a good thing or not.
I was like, I'm basically a community worker.
Alright, okay, I think we're pushing it a
bit too far. Yeah, a community worker, you want to put yourself on the same level as, community nurses, care workers, people that are in health and social care. Really, you're having sex with virgins. Like, you're not doing a service. But no, Bonnie Blue is an angel, and she's trying to help the men that do get insecure, though I don't know why they'd be watching the men in. Statistically, the most popular porn category is lesbian porn, so the idea that the big barrier to male enjoyment is, oh, that guy's abs are just too good, feels a bit flimsy. And if we're talking about realistic and average looking, Bonnie Blue is not an average looking woman. Not all women's bodies look like hers, and not all women want to have sex the way that she does. So while she's supposedly breaking male body stereotypes, she's still reinforcing female ones, even if she's not intending to. Her work may make some men feel more represented, sure, but it also risks setting women up against yet another impossible standard. Which is exactly what Mulvey was talking about in her male gaze theory, because I gotta bring theory in even if I am going a bit off script. Women in visual media are almost always positioned as spectacles for male pleasure, even when the surface narrative says otherwise. Here, Bonnie's realism keeps her as the central spectacle, conventionally attractive, highly performative, while the male co-stars kind of fade into relatable background props. So yes, some men might feel less insecure, and that's great, but the structure still says that women perform and men consume. And when relatable still uses conventionally attractive women with highly performative sexualities, then it's not dismantling unrealistic expectations, it's just shifting them around.
It's boring. Surely there's more to life.
That's why she did it, guys, because she was bored. That's the big secret. She's not traumatized, something majorly bad didn't happen, she wasn't coerced, no, she was bored.
No, 1,600 condoms.
Well, at least they're being safe. It seems like Bonnie's framing what she's doing, whether it be aiming for 1,000 men in a day or organising as a feminist act, something that's empowering.
This is what I want. This is not for everybody.
She says that other women don't have to do it, and that she wants to be able to do what she wants. And on the surface, that is a classic my body, my choice argument, but the problem is it isn't operating in a vacuum. She's previously called women who criticise her basic and said things like, if your wife isn't pleasuring you or is too lazy to give you sex, then I will.
I have a sex worker, like an escort, and I used to judge men that cheated. And then when I actually started speaking to these men, I was like, you know what, they've got a point. They're going to work, they're looking after their kids, they're still emptying the dishes because the wife's now refusing to do that, saying it should be equal. And then I say, well, when's the last time she gave you when's the last time she f***ed you? They couldn't name it. They couldn't even list the amount of times where they've had sexual intercourse. I'm like, of course you're going to need that. Of course you're going to cheat.
That's not simply, I respect your choice not to do this. That's actively shaming women who don't want to have sex all the time, whether she believes it or not. She's positioning them as deficient, frigid, or failing their male partners. Now, within feminism, bodily autonomy means defending someone's right to say yes and someone's right to say no. You don't get to use feminism or empowerment rhetoric as a shield for your sexual choices while weaponizing it against other women's boundaries. That's not liberation, that's selling your own freedom by devaluing theirs. And this is the problem with neoliberal feminism and choice feminism and pop feminism. It turns personal empowerment into a brand, and in that branding, any woman that isn't doing what you're doing becomes an obstacle to the market that you're trying to reach. Feminism or empowerment here isn't about a collective liberation, it's about justifying your market niche. Feminism has granted us the right to make these choices, but that doesn't mean that all choices are inherently feminist, nor does it mean that they're good or that they're free from criticism. The ability to choose is the baseline. Feminism's work is about changing the structures that shape those choices and how they impact others. When we conflate that with Bonnie Blue is what feminists wanted, or you've been asking for these rights for years and now you're mad at a woman using their rights, we're vastly misinterpreting the movement's fundamental aims. Feminism is a collective project to dismantle systems of gendered oppression. That doesn't just mean oppression for women, but oppression for all genders. It isn't about maximising the sexual availability of individual women to men. When that line gets blurred, you don't end up celebrating feminist liberation, you end up celebrating the patriarchy. Maybe it's not as simple as my body, my choice, and your body, your choice, when your choice includes shaming women for not meeting the sexual appetites of the men in their lives. When the actual 1,000 Men Day rolls around, the documentary does show that the ID checks were being done and consent forms were being signed. Fine. But then it casually drops that, unlike most events, I guess you could call them, which require recent STD test results, Bonnie just asks them to use condoms.
Bring along their STI tests. Bonnie's not asking for that today, but wants the men to wear a condom.
That's concerning. That's suspicious. That's weird. If you've had any sex education, regardless of how poor it actually is in the UK, you would know that condoms reduce the risk of certain STIs, but they don't prevent everything. Plenty of infections can spread through skin-to-skin contact, oral sex, or just poor condom use. That's why other events require testing in the first place. It's basic safeguarding, not an optional extra.
What if I've got more staff, but I have people to be inside me today? So...
See, that was like framed as like an insecure thing, which I did start to feel a little bit bad for her, but then she just makes it about how many people are going to be inside. God, what am I watching? I'm fanning myself because it's really hot today, not because I'm getting a hot fudge, because I've just saw these on the screen.
Right, if you want to come and bust 10 nuts today, I'm not going to complain.
What? Did he just actually say that? That might have been meant as a harmless joke, but it kind of lands a bit pimpish. I don't know, maybe it's just the lingo. Oh. Nice. So at one point in the documentary, once they've finished, they video Bonnie Blue doing like a condom angel. Like a snow angel, but like with all the condoms, all the used condoms on the floor. And the caption of the video is, "Don't worry, wives, your husbands were safe."
a starfish. That's when you're in the snow.
Wait, that says, "Don't worry, wives, this is proof your husband used protection." Which just feels like poking a bear. Especially when safe here means no penis to vagina fluid exchange, ignoring every other transmission route. This is the problem when is framed as purely a personal empowerment story. It leaves no room to ask whether safety measures were actually good enough. Because if you do, maybe you get painted as being a killjoy or a prude or a basic woman that she's been mocking since the start. But workplace safety isn't prudish, it's the bare minimum. Employers and by extension organisers, like these ones, have a duty to ensure as far as reasonably practical that the health and safety and welfare of those involved in a workplace are prioritised or met. In any other industry, wouldn't skipping a full health check before a high-risk event be considered a breach of duty then? And sure enough, afterwards, Bonnie Blue says that she came down with the worst flu that she's ever had. Which might not be an STI, but it's a stark reminder that high contact events with minimal health protocols can have real consequences.
But yeah, I've never had such bad flu in my life.
There's a real big issue here. In the UK, performers aren't recognised as employees in the same way that other high-risk professionals are. So there's no industry-wide standard for testing, no enforceable safety recognitions or regulations, and no legal requirements for organisers to provide adequate protection. If she'd been working in any other high-exposure role then, from healthcare to adult entertainment in countries with stronger labour protections, catching an illness after a poorly managed mass event wouldn't just be unlucky, it would be considered a workplace safety failure. But because it's treated as an individual hustle, especially on OnlyFans, rather than a legitimate workplace, the risk just gets absorbed by the performer. And in this case, under the banner of choice.
A key aspect of Bonnie's business model is to rage bait. It's a genius business model.
No, this saying that she's just a businesswoman, a marketing genius whose strategy is basically rage baiting, it's saying that this is all okay because she doesn't mean it, because it's in the idea of marketing.
I know the more women that chat about me, the more...
Is that not morally wrong? They kind of argue that the people that know her would understand that she doesn't actually mean it and it's just clever marketing to fit the current climate, does that make it right? Because even if she doesn't believe every word, what she's still doing is normalizing the idea that cheating is fine, that men are owed sex, and that women who refuse are lazy or defective. These are ideas that have deep roots in culture and martial coercion, and that it's just marketing excuse falls apart under a feminist lens. Marketing doesn't exist in a vacuum. None of this does. It shapes culture just as much as it reflects it. When you platform a rhetoric that undermines sexual autonomy, especially women's sexual autonomy, you don't get to absolve yourself of it because it's only to get clicks. You're still feeding cultural scripts that hurt women, including the women that you claim you're not talking about, including the women that have the right not to do those things, as you've said, but now you're contradicting yourself in the name of content. But clearly the clicks are working. The documentary notes that she did earn about £1 million in 1 month, which is staggering.
This month has just hit over £1 million. So I wasn't expecting to earn over £1 million.
That is an unbelievable amount of money, but it makes me sad because there are so many people that work so many jobs that deserve that kind of money. You know, NHS workers, teachers, these people that dedicate their lives and their careers to helping people. It's disappointing. The industries that make the most money are often the most exploitative and morally corrupt. But there's a bigger kicker to this. With that kind of money, and she says that she wants to keep going, it just makes me wonder, is it really about personal freedom anymore, or is it just about chasing bigger and bigger paydays and celebrity status, no matter what that celebrity status is built on, whether it's social media fallout or slut-shaming rhetoric? When financial incentive and harmful rhetoric become this tangled, that my body, my choice defense stops looking like feminism and it starts looking like capitalism with a ring light and multiple men with ski masks on. There's then a clip of her going to a awards show that she was nominated for, and it talks about how other stars and OnlyFans creators don't like her and she's not really respected in the industry. Then there's a bit where her gangbang video gets pulled from OnlyFans, not because it broke the law, but because OnlyFans suddenly changed its policy about not publishing sex with normal people, only certified creators. Now, Bonnie says that this isn't about morality, but about money, specifically Visa's money. So Visa controls the payment processing and by extension gets to decide what can and can't be sold on the site, which is complicated. On the one hand, yeah, this policy could be a good thing. It prevents random men from walking in off the street and getting filmed and disappearing without any accountability or verification. From a safety perspective, certification should be standard. But it's also not about the performer's safety. It's about Visa protecting its own brand image, which means that these roles are ultimately based on their preferences, not the actual needs of workers. And those preferences can be arbitrary or moralistic, but they're still exploitive. People that want to make this kind of content are going to continue doing so. They're just going to leave the platform. And if there isn't a safer alternative, then maybe they'll go to some dodgy ones. Unregulated sites are notorious for being far more exploitative of performers, with less consent management, worse safety standards, and little to no recourse if you're harmed. And that's exactly why that blanket criminalization of sex work doesn't stop sex work. It just makes it more dangerous. People in the industry don't suddenly go, "Oh, the law has spoken. It's time to hang up my lingerie and live a conservative lifestyle." They just move into riskier spaces where there's less oversight and fewer protections.
She prefers to make sex tapes with the public, and they make her the most money.
I can't help but think as well that, you know, is it because it helps the men, or is it because it makes her more money? Like, it's framed as this good thing that she's helping men, but is it really just the fact that this is what sells more that's pushing her to do it? Now, because she's been banned from filming with normal people, she moves on to filming with male porn stars, which she claims that many of them won't work with her because of their partners being jealous. Maybe, you know, it's a possibility, but also maybe some of these partners who, let's not forget, are performers themselves have valid criticisms about Bonnie's approach, rhetoric, or boundaries. Dismissing all of that reluctance as jealousy is just an easy out because it means you never have to engage with actual legitimate objections. And this is the same pattern that we keep seeing in her framing. Every form of pushback, whether that be from other women, the partners of male performers, wider feminist critique, it gets filed under the same category. They're just insecure, which is convenient because it means Bonnie never has to consider that some people are pushing back for ethical reasons, not personal envy. We also meet another star called Andy, who basically takes his hat off to Bonnie and says that he wouldn't be able to do what she does.
I personally couldn't do what she does. What she does is very, very mentally draining.
And he explains that you have to advertise your content in a certain way when you do. You can't just advertise it like normal content.
And the only way to advertise it is to do something wild stunts to get people talking.
You can't just stick up a wholesome Instagram reel with a call to action link. You have to put on a wild stunt to cut through the noise. And sure, that's the same playbook that we saw with Belle Delphine selling bathwater or Astrid Wet at football matches. Shock marketing works and it gets you mainstream attention fast, but it comes with the backlash cycle. People aren't just reacting to the content, they're reacting to the deliberate provocation. And if your whole strategy is engineered outrage, winding people up with your TikToks, then you can't really act surprised when the outrage includes criticism that you don't like. So she keeps hammering home this idea that amateur porn is better. And on one level, she's not wrong. Traditional porn is made with professional performers, and it often sets the kind of sexual expectation that belongs in the same category as, Marvel fight scenes. Entertaining, but not something you'd expect to replicate in real life. But it's kind of a double-edged sword that she doesn't acknowledge. While professional porn creates unrealistic fantasies, amateur porn normalizes the industry itself. It blurs the lines between this is a performance and this is reality because the people you're seeing could just as easily be from your uni class or your gym or even your Tinder feed. It embeds porn culture into everyday intimacy, and that has its own risks. And at one point, the documentary creator actually challenges her on this. Do you really need to offer this to men? What about young men who will see your content before they're legally allowed to? And Bonnie's answer, well, parents should just be more active in controlling what their kids see online. Because it's that simple, isn't it? Parent of the Year award goes to Bonnie Blue. Now on paper, she's right. Parental involvement is really important, but in practice, it's a total sidestep. It ignores the fact that platforms like OnlyFans and the industry in general profit off the fact that age restrictions are basically a joke. And as I pointed out at the start of this video, it takes nothing more than clicking yes, I am 18 to see explicit content nowadays. So putting the full responsibility on parents is a neat way of avoiding taking any responsibility for how your content is distributed or how it reaches.
Last spring break, Bonnie had sex with 126 students
STDs
in 2
spread.
weeks.
Isn't herpes one of the most popular, popular as if STDs are popular. It's one of the most common STDs in America, and it's one that isn't contained through using a condom. I'm not saying she has STDs, by the way, but I'm just saying this is just so unsafe.
Teaching them how to have sex, watching their face light up as they, lost their virginity.
It's framed as this moral thing, she's doing them a favour, teaching them how to have sex. No.
Love making the most is the barely legals, the students, the husbands. I don't know, there's just so much more purpose to it.
Purpose? Having sex with people's husbands? Why? I'm just gonna get called basic. That I think it's wrong to have sex with other people's husbands. Don't get me wrong, the men are probably worse because they're the one committing adultery, but if you're knowingly sleeping with somebody in a relationship, that at least makes you ethically murky.
And tapping out. And if you tap out, it doesn't mean it's a bad experience. It just means you're saying, okay, that's
See,
enough.
it's actually a shame because some of the things that she says do kind of give good views around sex, saying it's okay if you don't want to continue, but I think that gets lost in consent, the manufacturing of the performance, that all gets lost when you're watching it, especially when young men are watching it. They forget that it's not real. And by bringing real people off the street, which she's trying to make it seem real, but we're not seeing any of those conversations about consent. Those conversations should be happening, yet they're not shown on film, and that's a huge issue. Then we get to the classroom scene. Yeah, a literal classroom set where Bonnie and a group of other OnlyFans creators are dressed as school kids, and she's teaching them about sex.
Today we're going to learn about consent.
For her next
But again, they're not learning about consent. Like, it's playing directly into a sexualized schoolgirl fantasy. And before anyone jumps in with, but they're all adults, yeah, they are, but the aesthetic they're selling leans straight into the kind of paedophilic messaging that mainstream porn has been profiting from for decades, and why so many women, especially feminists, have an issue with porn. It's not just roleplay, it's roleplay built on a cultural script that eroticizes youth, innocence, and power imbalance, which seems to be a running theme for her.
Only ways you're comfortable in. Don't just say it because everyone's here.
That's good that he's done that. Like, I know I'm sympathizing with the male, but we even hear from one of the women that she attracts an audience because she's childlike. I don't know about you, but that's a part that makes my skin crawl.
21.
Oh, you look younger. That's why they got you in.
Yeah.
What? That's what? How would you?
Because you look underage.
Yes. Yes.
She's nodding as if it's a good thing.
The younger girls have come along for free today.
For free?
No, I'm not being paid today. It'd just be I get tagged and then hopefully I get followers and subs from that.
I mean, like, that is kind of how, like, collaborations work, but it does just seem like the oldest exploitative trick in the book. We're talking about an industry that's already built on precarious labour, and here's another example of workers giving away their free time and their bodies and their image for free, with the vague promise that it will pay off later. It's not empowering to dress exploitation up and call it collaboration. It's still unpaid labour, it's still fetishizing youth, and it's still feeding the same tropes that claim to be liberating while keeping all of the old power structures intact.
The UK has now one of the highest numbers of OnlyFans creators
Probably because
in
of
the
the cost
world.
of living.
Instagram will turn into OnlyFans eventually.
I just think it's great that the videographer, you know, dropped his galaxy brain prediction that eventually Instagram will become OnlyFans once people realise that they can make money off their pictures. Like, yes, Mark Zuckerberg definitely needs more ways to monetize thirst traps. I can actually see him doing it now.
Yeah, I really want to do a disabled bang.
I've still got 10 minutes left. It seems that Bonnie Blue is upping the stakes for everyone, though at this point it feels less like upping the stakes and more like chasing the last hit before the high wears off. She's peaking, and when you're peaking, you have to keep one-upping yourself, and that's why her latest big idea is a petting zoo. And no, not the animal kind. The Bonnie kind. She'll be tied up in a box on public display for strangers to, in her words, do what they want to her.
I want to be tied up in a glass box for 24 hours.
Would it not be uncomfortable being in a glass box for that long?
Women, you fought for women's rights for years
This
and
is
years.
this is the issue. They didn't fight for you to lock yourself up in a box to be toyed with by the public, though. Now, she says that she checked with OnlyFans and they gave her the green light, but after advertising it, she got banned completely, which, let's be real, is probably less to do with morality and more to do with PR optics. Because the moment you hit these mainstream headlines with woman in a box for public use, and the sponsors are going to start sweating.
Now makes me look like all the other girls where you just lie about things, and that is the whole opposite of Bonnie Blue. So
She's more concerned about her image, which I think is telling.
the last time I went out by myself was probably about 6 months ago.
I think that that's really sad.
My worst one is acid. I think if someone did acid, and I can imagine some spiteful girls doing that.
I am going to say, like, I know I'm being very critical, but I don't think she deserves any violence towards her. She is holding up a very harmful industry that does exploit people, but that doesn't mean she shouldn't be able to go out, you know, and enjoy. She's made all this money and she can't enjoy it, which then also kind of contradicts why she wants to make more money, because she can't even. Yeah. And this pushes her onto Fansly. And how does she announce it? Well, she goes on the podcast with Andrew Tate. Of course she does.
Whether people love him or hate him, he's a marketing genius.
Joseph Goebbels was a propaganda genius. Should we be like... She's doing a podcast with a man who's currently on trial for sex crimes and is a self-proclaimed misogynist. The documentary maker does ask her about this, like, is it not wrong to platform and enable someone like Tate? And her response is something like, well, Piers Morgan interviews serial killers, so is he bad?
Piers Morgan interviews serial killers all the time. It's not messed up his brand.
Yeah, but like interviewing, platforming, which is possibly the most baffling moral equivalence I've ever heard, because here's the thing, interviewing someone to challenge them is not the same as using their platform to promote yourself and your business, especially when the platform actively celebrates and normalizes the very misogyny feminism exists to dismantle.
Multiple things by the media, and so have I.
Yeah, but you're not on trial for sex crimes.
I think he's a genius. He's marketing smart. He's the male version of
Of course
her.
you do. It all makes sense that Josh is a fan of Andrew Tate.
I feel like this isn't a trip I need or want to go on.
No, me neither, honey. At the end of the day, 1,000 Men and Me isn't really about women's sexual liberation. It's about a business model dressed up as liberation, wrapped in provocation and sold as empowerment. Bonnie insists that she's just doing what she wants, but when doing what you want involves shaming other women and playing into most predatory tropes and partnering with men who profit from misogyny and are on literal trial for sex crimes, it's not as simple as the my body, my choice argument. As I've said, feminism has fought for our right to make choices, but that doesn't mean that every choice is feminist. Some choices actively undermine the movement's collective goals, especially when they reinforce the same male-centric power structures we've been resisting for decades. And when critics like me point this out, it's not puritanism, it's not conservatism, and it's not slut-shaming. It's recognizing that liberation without solidarity isn't liberation at all. It's just the market, monetizing your body until you burn out, get banned, or have to tie yourself up in a box to stay relevant. Bonnie might think that she's rewriting the rules of the industry and she's bringing something new to the table, but really, she's just playing the same old game, just faster, louder, and with more public participants. But hey, that's just my opinion. I'm gonna go lie down in a dark room and contemplate my life. If you did enjoy this video, leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Comment down below what your thoughts are. With that, I'll see you soon.